Welcome to I Heart Geek.
And welcome to another episode of I Heart Geek. Yes, the world's best segue, and I hope all of this made it into TikTok, so you know why we are dying right now.
Oh my god!
Oh,
I gotta heat it up for you guys.
When we're not recording, that you guys would love.
But we can't talk about any of that on this episode because we are instead.
It usually involves swear words and obscene gestures.
There's so many guitars, It sounds like an Eddie Van Halen concert. That's all I'm saying. Okay, with that being said, we are discussing sitcoms of 1979 and earlier.
Shows, not just sitcoms.
Shows.
Just
Yes.
shows, yeah.
Shows. I'm sorry, shows.
We covered all those sitcoms during the WandaVision episodes.
WandaVision.
Oh, it just doesn't stop ever.
Everything is WandaVision now.
Time.
Well, that's okay. And I do want to put this disclaimer out before I introduce the panel. We came up with this episode before we saw WandaVision, so we're not copying the WandaVision thing. Not that that's a bad thing, but I just want to say we were original on this because we do we were at our shows like 6 months in advance and then record them. Woo, behind the curtain. Okay, so on this panel, there's Dub, me, and I do stuff. And with me is Courtney and Skeeter and Satomi and Blythe. What are you doing out from behind your computer?
What's up, everybody? I'm back in the seat today.
What just happened?
We don't know what happened on that.
That's why I sit behind my computer.
Can you just say,
Oh.
and another one? Just say it for me. And another one.
And another one?
Yeah.
Oh.
Way to go, Cal. We just got the teeth. And we're back.
And we're back. Okay. So let's jump right into this conversation. I think I will say this is the most important era of TV is 1979 and before. This late, because let's be honest,
because when TV was invented.
Well, there is no creativity left in the world of TV. So everything is basically
You're literally
going
to start the show with that.
What an old man thing to say.
Am I wrong?
There's just no creativity anymore.
You're very
Am I
wrong.
wrong?
You are wrong.
Okay.
So Tony is a
Not.
TV actress. That is
I'm
her
not saying anything about
world.
the actors.
And
I'm
you
talking
said,
about the writers.
No, there's no creativity
Wow.
there.
Right
We
away,
just
I am the
spent-
bad
We
guy.
just spent 6
man.
weeks talking about how the writing was so amazing
Uh-huh.
in WandaVision.
And what
and
did
it
they
was
do?
And it was like nothing we'd seen before.
But what did they
So,
do? They copied
Mike
every era of
Ross-
sitcom.
They didn't
Let's
copy
move on.
it.
They didn't copy it.
expanded the
homaged it.
mythos.
They
of
homaged it.
Oh my gosh! Get
Honestly,
it out.
You guys-
when I said this, I did not mean it as a bad thing. I didn't mean it as an insult. Holy crap. Wow.
I guess the last, 3,000 years of theater in general just doesn't count for Dub.
No,
Nope,
none of
only
it at all.
1950 through 1979. That's it. But it did give us Mark and Mindy. So, I mean,
That's his bar.
I'm not
of
wrong.
TV creativity.
I'm not wrong. It kind of is until the
What's
last
wrong with
episode.
Mark and Mindy?
Nothing.
What's wrong with
It's
it?
perfect.
That's the bar you're setting
That's a pretty high bar.
out of all the things.
Let's be honest, that's a high bar.
Shoutsbot.
We broke
Shut
Courtney.
butt.
Courtney's not on the show.
Courtney's
No,
no
no,
longer
no.
on the show.
No.
Well,
I don't think I've ever seen Courtney that color.
I
It's
haven't
gonna be
either.
one of those episodes for Courtney, apparently.
For all of our listeners, go to YouTube so that you can see the nice shade of red that Courtney has
That-
become.
Like, it's
I'm-
literally, that's not a filter, y'all.
That's really what I look like when I laugh
Wow.
too hard.
Oh, wow. Today is going to be a good
You
day.
guys are killing me today.
Oh, this is a fun panel, and I'm glad I put this panel together for this.
Oh my, okay.
So, what is it about this era that set the groundwork for everything that we watch today in TV? And yes, this is when it was invented, but
Yeah, it's when
This
it
is-
started.
this is where they got the seeds of most of the ideas that we see today on TV. See, I'm not
Which came from other places, but we won't get into that.
no.
Yes, we will.
Yeah,
Okay, yes,
we need to track it back because Dub's conception of reality is
Oh,
completely
wow.
off right now.
This hurts a little
Steve's like,
bit.
and I'm ready for this class.
Taking notes.
No, I mean, it was the it was the invention of TV. I mean, we made the transition from radio into TV, and like in the 50s, that's when families started to have television sets in their homes.
As
you know,
a
I
piece
mean,
of furniture.
Yeah, and I mean, it was it was rare. And then by the time you hit the 60s and the 70s, almost every home in America had a television in their house. You know, not 7 TVs like we have now, but you have
And one on your
a
phone.
single TV. And I mean, it was a family event. Like when I Love Lucy or Leave the Beaver came on, it was okay, family night. We have our dinner, and then we go and we watch I Love Lucy or the Ed Sullivan Show, and we do that as a family. So I mean, it was a family event and activity.
A great line from Back to the Future when Marty goes back and gets hit by the car. What happens when they're sitting at the table? The dad's like, "Look at it roll! Now we can watch Jackie Gleason while we eat." You know, like family time TV while you're eating dinner.
And I mean, they would do events. And I mean, because I remember back when I was a kid, even then, you know, the special family events you would do is they would show The Wizard of Oz on TV. And you would sit there and watch it. So I mean, that's kind of, I think, what you're talking about.
I think also another thing is just the invention of the TV and the advancement in TV itself, but the technology to film as well.
Yeah.
A lot of those early sitcoms and shows, they were experimenting with the way that they filmed for the first time. So that's another reason why you've got seeds of how we do things today in those older
And
shows.
that's some very cool experiments that happened with that. Tsutomi?
Well, I actually was going to go into what Blythe is talking about, but TV, especially at this era of TV, you're looking at taking theater, which is a millennium old art form that was all about community, and bringing it into the home. So as this happens, you're watching not only having this communal experience that's able to be experienced in the intimacy of your own home, but you're also watching the development literally of finding out what they can do with this new technology. And it's a heightened time of development, kind of like computers.
Yeah.
You know, like we kind of had these large lumbering computers for a long time. And then all of a sudden it was, we went from, you know, it takes an entire warehouse to your desktop, to your palm of your hand within decades. So this is the TV version of that.
Yeah.
Did that make sense?
It actually did.
100%. It's an advancement in technology, just like many things, computers, audio, filming, all of it just was in jumped leaps and bounds because of the popularity of it. If TV wasn't as popular as it had become, we wouldn't have seen those advancements go as fast as they did.
But go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No,
Well,
go ahead.
the one thing I was just going to add really quickly is the other thing with TV coming into invention, then it was also the ability to provide news and that kind of stuff to people at a faster rate than it was happening before. You know, one thing that comes to mind is like the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Well, if something like that had happened without the advent of television, you would have heard it on the radio or you would have read it in the newspaper. With the advent of television, you're getting that people were getting that data right then and there while it was happening. And like it happened, and they would immediately be on television saying, you know, maybe like an hour later, okay, the president's been shot. Here you go. This is what we know. Or the moon landing. You know, it's like, there they are. They're on the moon. We can see them on the moon. So, I mean, it was also a way to that's a great getting information to humans faster than letter writing.
Yeah. Well, and because of this era that we're talking about, this is the era before cable. We had 3 channels, maybe 4, but 3 channels. And PBS. What that did was that took the whole world, or let's just say the nation, and everybody was watching the same thing. So everybody had an experience together. Unlike now where everything is so specialized. You know, 100 people watch this around the country and you guys are all like talk to each other on the internet, but it doesn't, you know, it's not that communal experience. That's why I've been loving like these Disney Plus shows. It feels like it's bringing the country back together because it's something we're all talking about and it's an experience we're all having. That's something that they had in this era of TV that is, I think, amazing. Skeeter, you have
It's that
something?
water cooler.
I really think like beyond technology, beyond all of the things, like look at, I mean, I know we talked about WandaVision and I know we did all of that, but look at what they did with WandaVision. Even from the very first episode, they tied every opening to a specific jingle, to a soundtrack, to music from that era. So that ties you to a show. Like the opening, look at Big Bang Theory. Like I could sing that song with my eyes closed. The theme song to Psych. Every theme song to every show had a specific pull you in.
Yeah.
Then it was character selection. Like you tied somebody to character selection. Leave It to Beaver, Brady Bunch. Doesn't matter what it was. They connected you to a character in some way, shape, and form, and that's what brought you in. That's what stuck you to the show and carried you on. And I think today's TV does the same thing. It doesn't matter what it is. You either find a character or you do something that connects you to it. And I really think like that's the biggest thing beyond technology, beyond everything.
Yeah.
Is the connection to the show itself, that, to every part of it, not just, and those are the shows that don't last, but even the shows that even last like a season or two that you become connected to, what happens? They cancel them because of Grey's Anatomy.
Well, it also offered, because again, we're talking about the roots being in theater, and I'm going to keep saying this, television roots are in theater. Because that excites me. But, up until that point, we didn't really have serial storytelling beyond like the Penny Dreadfuls or like, little serials in the newspapers. So that style of storytelling had not really blossomed until TV. And I think that's where we get what you're just talking about, Skeet, because up until this point, we're normally talking about you're sitting in a theater for anywhere from 2 to 3 hours and you're seeing one story play. Maybe you might have a part 1 and part 2. And then suddenly we're in a medium that, because you don't have to leave the comfort of your own home, you get to watch episode after episode after episode that continues this story in this sort of epic saga kind of thing, which is, has led today to the binge watch.
Right. I think Satomi's like nailed it right on the head, because like we try to go to the Roger Rocca Theater up in Fresno, and it's a dinner theater, but at Christmas time they do the Christmas Story musical. And one of my most favorite parts about that just is so connecting and so like the thing I love about it the most is the narrator.
Yeah.
It's that guy that brings you into each scene and each portion. And that kind of like takes you back to the simpler time of like radio or old TV of what we're talking about today.
And that's where advertisers discovered we can control the world, because they're the ones that could get a character kicked off of a television show because they didn't like it or they thought their audience didn't. And in one part, it was power to the people, because they had the power. Well, I'm going to support these advertisers because they're supporting the show. I'm not going to support them because they're not. And yes, that gave us some power, but now I feel like it's kind of gone the opposite. We have no control, and the advertisers get to do whatever. And this is not going on a weird slant or anything, but advertisers is what created TV. This soap is brought to you by Tide. That was.
We still have some control. I mean, how long did Puppy Baby Monkey run? Really?
That was a show?
No, that was the commercial. That was the Super Bowl commercial. That was so weird that people were like, huh? So it didn't run for long.
Yeah. No.
Okay.
Well, think about the Geico commercials. How long has that freaking gecko been?
How long do we have? We still seen the rabbit hitting his drum.
Right.
The Energizer Bunny.
But this is another episode. Commercial.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to take us over there. But I think the advertising is an important part of this era of TV, because that's when they learned how to shape what we saw. So I'm going to ask everybody this question. What was the first TV show that you remember that had an impact on you as a child, and does it still stick? Let's start with Courtney on this one.
in my top 5.
You can still say it.
Okay, it was Wonder Woman because it's literally one of the first shows I remember watching.
Uh-huh.
Now, I watched it after the fact because I was born in 77 and that's when the show popped out. But yeah, I remember it's true. But yeah, I mean, I just remember how cool she was. Because I mean Linda Carter's inherently cool.
Yeah.
But I just, I remember all the good things she did. And I watch it now and I'm like, this show is really bad. But I still watch it for nostalgia factor. But yeah, when I was a 5-year-old, that thing blew my freaking mind.
Yeah. And we'll talk about it even more as we get to the top 5s. So tell me, what about you?
Just sit right back and you'll hear a tale of a fateful trip. Gillian's Island.
Yes.
It was definitely, again, like Courtney, it's one of the earliest ones that I remember watching. And I honestly can't tell you what it is that stuck. It captured my imagination and it was delightful. And it's still delightful. It's dated and ridiculous and delicious.
Well, the fact that it was the same setting every week and they were still able to do new things every week was just such a creative, I mean, yes, they did in the cartoon, but it's not like, well, they're going to go to space this week. It was just, life. It's kind of amazing how they did that.
Yeah.
Mr. Blythe. You might want to take your mute off there, Mr. Blythe.
Sorry, guys.
It's been a while.
Baby on board, so trying to keep it as quiet as possible around here. My first recollection is probably Happy Days. Now, I knew this was going to come up because it always does. These shows were super old when I got to them, but this was on TV Land. That way it was Nickelodeon. The Nickelodeon became TV Land at like midnight. But when I would wake up as a kid in the middle of the night and I would try to turn on Nickelodeon, most of the time Happy Days was on. And that would be something that I would sit there and watch and not fully understand what everything that was going on was. But as I grew up and watched them later, I found them more enjoyable. And I think I just connected with that show because I was exposed to it so early.
Yeah. Skeeter?
There's so many. I can't even think, but I think because my dad watched it, but MASH for me just left like this giant imprint.
One of the truly perfect television shows.
The characters of the theme song still sits in my brain. And I'll never forget the very last episode. When Hawkeye's flying away in the helicopter and it says goodbye in the rocks, and my dad cried. Like that was like, I remember sitting there watching my dad just bawl his face off at the end of this show, and I loved it. Like I can't explain why it left that impact on me. I think that was one of the reasons, was watching my dad cry and trying to understand why he was crying. But it's happened since then for me with different shows, and it just, that was it for me. MASH was huge.
Fair enough. My first one was Leave It to Beaver, which every time you'd get sick and you'd go during the day, you'd go home like, because I'm sick. Oh no, I have a fever. I can't be here anymore. So you'd go home and you'd watch Leave It to Beaver. And I grew, even though we were, 50 years apart, I related to Beaver. I mean, we were I grew up with him by watching him through those old reruns. And that's why he's always stuck. I mean, to this day, I can still watch these shows and just laugh and I just relate. Even though the era was nothing like what I grew up in, I can relate. And I don't know how they did that, but you were able to relate so many years difference, which is really nice. I want to break this down into 3 parts because I think that these are all kind of important. We're going to talk 1959 and earlier, 1969 and earlier, and 1979 and earlier. Now, why I'm breaking these up is because they're 3 different eras of TV. The 1959 and earlier was very much the traditional family. It was black and white. It was father knows best, and it was very, that the atomic family, I guess, would be the best way to say it. And it was interesting. There was never you never walked away with a problem. And that's where the whole the 30 minutes and you're done, and problem solved, blah blah, because dad came home and fixed it. And that is an idealized version, but that's what all of that stuff was. Do you guys have any thoughts on that era of TV? It's all black and white.
I believe it's referred to as the golden age of TV, or the golden era of TV.
Mm-hmm.
Actually goes to 60, so you're a little bit close. But because it was the first kind of TV shows, but it had some of those groundbreaking shows like I Love Lucy and Leave It to Beaver and Andy Griffith, and that kind of set up how TV was going to be. We're considered to be in the second golden age of TV right now, because of some of the shows that come out. But yeah, I mean, it's a totally critical point of television. So much so that it's got its own special name now.
Yeah.
It's not just 1960 and earlier. It's literally it's considered the golden era of TV, because I Love Lucy and the Monsters and all that stuff was in there at that time.
Yeah, they really did introduce in that era subtlety, comedic subtlety. Dick Van Dyke, seeing Mary Tyler Moore, what she did was just, it was different. It's different comedy than we still see today, but they really introduced a lot of that. It wasn't as much of, it's more subtle.
I call Dick Van Dyke's comedy
No,
subtle.
Dick Van Dyke isn't, but I would say Mary Tyler Moore was. I would say that, in
her show, yes, but when she was in the Dick Van Dyke show, she still was kind of over the top too. But I can see where you're.
I don't think, but that's.
She fell out of the. There's an episode where you open up the
walnuts.
the walnut. They open up the closet and she slides down on a whole bed of ping pong. So I mean, that's not really subtle comedy.
Yeah, but they were able to do things that they couldn't do in theater that look. I mean, you watch that very scene I was thinking about when she runs down and she's on her elbows and she just gives this look to the camera that's so cute and innocent and mischievous all at the same time. And because that close up angle, that was something they were able to introduce a lot.
All I'm thinking of is the I Love Lucy, the chocolate episode, yes. But there's another episode that I can't remember the name of, but it's like one of my favorite, but she's baking a loaf of bread and she ends up putting too much yeast in it. So when she goes to open the oven, this gigantic long loaf of bread pushes her all the way across the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
It's hilarious. Sorry, I just thought of that.
No, that's awesome, actually. Another thing. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Do you think that this age of television, because it was the beginning, but the reason why it caught so many people was because in this era of just human society, especially in America, the white picket fence family was always at the face of everything. So no matter what you had going on indoors, what you were visualized as on the outside to everyone else was trying to emulate this perfect apple pie family. Mm-hmm. So what these TV shows did was they took that concept of the perfect family, but then they created these little issues that you would have inside your house, but they made it funny. Like the whole thing with too much yeast in the bread. Now, if you were to do that in real life, it would completely abolish whatever you're trying to cook that may have been taking you hours to cook. But they make it funny, and people can relate to that. They're like, "Oh yeah, I mess with that, or I've done something quirky like that."
The other thing is I think you also have to remember is when this stuff started to happen, when the golden era of TV, this decade that Dub was talking about started, we were still coming off of World War II.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so, World War II ended in 45, but you had TV starting about 47, 48.
Mm-hmm.
So we were still kind of coming off of that, and people were still looking for, I think we've talked about it before when we talked about individual superheroes being created and comic books coming about. People were looking for a reason to escape, and the normalcy of Lucy eating too many chocolates when she tries to go get a job, or
Yeah.
ironing a hole through Ricky's shirt. Was just, it was silly and stupid. And it goes to what Bly says, like those kind of things could happen to any housewife, but she took them to the next level. And so it was like an escapism for people.
Yeah. Most importantly, it's what the country needed at the time. It really did.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in addition, again, going back to those theatrical roots, you're talking about, it's almost a straight lift of vaudeville onto the home screen. So, even so, the stories are smaller because they are in your homes. But what people are already used to going to see is this kind of over the top humor. So, like when people go back and they're like, "Well, it's so unrealistic," and it's like, well, really, a lot of those storylines were also developed for the stage, where everything does have to be bigger, and everybody was used to that being part of the theatrical experience. This whole thing now of this, like, minute, you lift an eyebrow and everybody's on the floor, howling in laughter is very new, because we've been slowly just bringing in the focus.
Yeah.
Compared to a hall that seats, they didn't have insanely large theaters at that time, but that seats like 800 people. That's going to be a very different experience.
Yeah.
Very good.
I think.
Oh, go ahead.
I just think, like, so looking at the list, like I looked at the top 10s, the top 20s, the top 100s of each era, and like thinking about the whole situation with, you have the separate beds, the purity of Leave It to Beaver, Ozzie and Harriet, and then from those shows spurred like Dobie Gillis from that, which was, The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis. And you had your comedy, that's your vaudeville stuff, just like the Honeymooners, Jackie Gleason stuff, the gags, sight gags. But also it kind of spurred a whole new era, because 1955, what happened? Disneyland opened. So you get the Wonderful World of Disney, which is still going today. Then you get The Price is Right. You start spurring all of these different shows to catch the attention of different demographics. And you're like, bam, now they start to control a huge piece. That's not just the nuclear family. That's not just the white picket fence. Now it's paying attention to everything.
Well, we're going to hit that actually in a second, but go ahead.
I think one of the first soap operas showed up in the 50s as well. I think, because I know Days of Our Lives, which is still on today, and been renewed. Yeah, and it's been renewed for another 4 years. I think it's been on the air for, I want to say, I think they just celebrated their 65th anniversary.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it might have been, and so I think it falls in the time frame we're talking about here.
Yeah.
From 79 to, I know that we're focusing on 59, but I think it started somewhere
before
in the
79.
50s.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and then I think there were a couple
65.
more which aren't around
65.
anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I know there was like The Young and the Restless was one that came out, I think, in the late 50s or early 60s. So I mean, to talk about what Skeet was saying, they were even creating shows that they catered mainly to housewives who were home by themselves, fixing house, taking care of the kids. So they would do their work, and then they would sit down for an hour and watch their stories, as I like to tease my mom.
Exactly the word I was going to use.
Right. My mom still watches Days of Our Lives, y'all. So
Watch their stories, yeah.
Yes, I'll tell her, I'm like, are you watching your stories? And she teases me because when I watch my Hallmark, she says it's me watching
the same
stories.
thing. Yeah. It is the exact same
It's
thing.
a modern day soap opera.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing. But they would sit down, and they would have, the dinner would be cooking and everything would be done. Their chores would be done for the day. Sit down in the afternoon, watch their stories, and then proceed with the rest of their day. And so they were even catering to them.
Okay, we got to move on to the 60 to 1969. What kind of changes? We had a couple of huge things that happened during this era. Color. Yeah, so about the middle of this era, color showed up, and that changed everything. It changed so they could tell the Star Trek world, and it brought things to life. And it was starting to explore teenagers as their own characters instead of just being an addition to the parents. Teenagers had their own mind in this era, which they weren't always rebellious. They weren't always quote unquote teenagers, but at least they had their own stories.
Later in the decade,
yeah.
for sure.
And another big thing they really did, what Skeeter was talking about earlier, a show called The Munsters comes up, and it's the first show that the mother and father, sleep in the same bed.
Was it the first?
That was the first instance.
Well, because they were a weird family.
Yeah. And that's why they were able to get away with it. And and they learned how to push the envelope in people that aren't normal. So therefore that way if it flopped, oh yeah, no, it's just they're a weird family. And if it took off, yeah, we're groundbreaking TV. So let's hit this area for a few minutes on what the big things are with this one.
I think in this decade, you really get the birth of the genre. Before, when we were talking about all the predecessors to this, the shows that you describe, or Leave It to Beaver, I Love Lucy, all those things are all family-oriented sitcoms. But like you said, in this decade, we got Star Trek, we got the Munsters, we got all these different things that birth, kind of touching on what Skeeter said earlier, different demographics and different people's interests. So that's where we really get the expansion of a lot of the stuff that we love today.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think you can also, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I think you can also, within the decade itself, you can see television change. And that has a lot to do with, one, with the color, as Deb said, but also with the Vietnam War. Storytelling changed because it was happy, 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 happy. Now we're at war. And that's when you can actually start to see things shift. And even to a certain part, Star Trek could be attributed to kind of that. It's like, not saying it was Roddenberry's response, but it was a little bit of Roddenberry's response. So you had things like the death of JFK, you had things of the assassination of Martin Luther King, you had the civil rights movement happening in the 60s, and then you also had Vietnam, and then the protests on the other side of Vietnam. And I think all of those things shaped the TV that was happening at the tail end of that decade as well. So, I mean, you can actually see television shift within the decade we're talking about right now. So I find that fascinating.
And you see rock and roll show up on TV.
That's right.
They were interviewing Jimi Hendrix.
Show.
Yeah. The Beatles, and just
Elvis on Elvis on
Ed Sullivan.
Ed Sullivan, and the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. Those were game changers in the music. Yep. I missed that, Dub.
Seeing Jimi Hendrix high out of his mind on TV at the time. And let's be honest, at the time, everyone just kind of swept that under the rug. No, he's just eccentric. No, he's high. But that was,
and you're right. That's when all those fun music shows started showing up too, like not American Bandstand, but American Bandstand.
The dance shows,
Clark himself. Hullabaloo. These are all things my mom has told me about.
It brought about
whatever was on Hairspray. Yeah,
it right, brought about this. It brought about during a time when there was just so much negativity. I mean, I remember, like, you talk to anybody from that era that was second, third, fourth, fifth grade and up that can remember. I mean, what's the thing they tell you about? I remember exactly where I was when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. I remember exactly where I was on this. Our generation can remember exactly where we were when Challenger blew up. Why? Because of TV. But during the 60s, during that era, 60 to 69, that's when the Sherwood Schwartz era kind of came to realization. 60s into the 70s, we started seeing Gilligan's Island. We started seeing like the Gomer Piles, which kind of was parody on what? On the military. Hogan's Heroes,
The non-family
the non-family stuff.
show.
But we started to bring this laughter in a different way to kind of take people's minds away from what was going on, all of the negativity with all of the loss from Vietnam and people getting pulled away. I look at the list of everything that was going on there. There was still some wholesome stuff, but it was wholesome with comedy. Petticoat Junction kind of things, Green Acres.
Yeah.
Like you just had these great shows. I mean, looking, what we had, I Dream of Jeannie, Lost in Space, The Munsters.
Something that I found really interesting, though, I mean, Courtney and Skeeter both had an incredible point, but we're also talking about a time of the first time we've had a real geek explosion in television, because you're talking about, they're getting more and more creative. This is sort of like the burgeoning special effects industry is really kind of coming into their own here with things like Lost in Space and Star Trek and Get Smart and Man from U.N.C.L.E., Bewitched, all of that. But then you're Batman. So you're also talking about this time where, all of our roots, our iHeart Geek roots, were really getting their start because they were able to lift this stuff from the world of the comic books and actually make it happen for real, air quotes, in front of your faces. So you can also see that with the amount of content that gets released at this time. It's a really exciting time.
And these were the kids that I think the first generation of kids that had grown up with comics, and now they're giving this to us. And I think that's, this is where geeks started to make their mark with it. But we were still ashamed and in the closet about it. But that's when it was. That's when it started.
Probably why we had such a huge boom of that content on television, because the people running these the different channels and things like that are looking at demographic data, and they're saying, well, these kids are shut in. The kids who like this stuff are the kids that are sitting at home in front of the TV. So let's make content geared towards them, to go back to the advertising thing that you were saying earlier, Dub, so that we can advertise particular products. This was also the era of crazy products. Like in comic books, you had the X-ray goggles, or you had the sea monkeys, or you had all this crazy stuff.
The brine shrimp,
and that also can attribute back to what you were saying about rock and roll and them going into teenagers, being more fleshed out in these shows, because that's another demographic that was watching TV heavily, was teenagers. So you cater to that demographic. You bring in the Beatles and Jimi Hendrix and the things that the kids are listening to these days. And you really lean into that.
Nice.
And the monkeys.
Okay, so let's jump up to our final era, which is 1970 to 1979. Big things. We hit on this. There's more alternative family situations. There's a single mom. There's blended families. There's black people and white people on the same show. There's black people having their own sitcoms. Which honestly, and because of this era, I never knew there was a difference between quote unquote black shows and white shows. I never caught that as a concept until I was way, way older, because it was brought about as so normal on TV. That's what this era did. This era also started the dramedy, when everything started to get a little serious because the drugs had worn off. The hippies realized, oh man, VD does last forever, man. It's kind of the crash. It's the crash from the hippies.
It's also, I mean, you can watch this in all of the entertainment industry. When things are difficult in real life, you tend to see more fantasy, more out there, more escapism in the entertainment. When things are going a little bit better, that's when you tend to see more drama in our entertainment, and that's just a human nature thing. It's just the way that people function, and that's why those things take off when things are are difficult. I mean, it's a massive time for MCU right now, and we're dealing with a pandemic. So, it's you can, if you watch the history of entertainment, you can watch that seesaw happening constantly.
A huge show in that era, Fantasy Island. I mean, that kind of narrows it down.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, and I mean, you also had things like the Rockford Files,
cop shows.
Yeah, I mean, you had, but I mean, you had a lot of those shows where it was the main character. Like, I'll look at Jim Rockford because I've been watching Rockford Files because it's free to watch on Peacock. But you had James Garner playing this detective he's a private investigator, but he's a little bit outside the law. So you had things like that starting to appear where you'd have these main characters who are, they're good people. Mm-hmm. They're the everyman kind of people. They're the good people, but they do not so good things in trying to get to the end of the good thing.
Yeah.
So you had stuff like that was occurring that didn't really kind of happen before. Because I mean, if you look at probably the most famous cop show, Dragnet,
just
those guys were straight and narrow and do. And then you have, in this era, you have
the Starskys and Hutches.
Yeah, the Starskys and Hutches and the Rockford, the Jim Rockfords and the Columbos, who are always just a little bit in the gray area. They were
definitely still good, kind of but it was gray.
Yeah, and it's something that was kind of explored. And there was always a little bit. Don't take this wrong, but there was always a little bit more promiscuity from characters.
It's the 70s.
I know, but it was accepted. It was more accepted now in the 70 to 79 kind of range. Because like MASH, one thing we thought about Hawkeye and Trapper and BJ was, like they're trying to make it with nurses this entire time. But we excuse that because it's part of the plot and it's funny and it's part of their character. Up until that point, that would not have been acceptable.
No. Well, but again, this goes back to hippies. This is right after free love. That's not something you want to give up after, the 1967 summer love. And like, well, we want to keep this going because this was a good thing for some of us, Blige, you had something?
Yeah, is this the era that established the buddy cop?
I think so.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah.
Totally.
This is the.
I mean, I think you could probably argue that Dragnet was buddy cop, but it didn't have any comedy, so
and they weren't really friends.
Hard.
They were. It was very procedural.
Yeah, that would be like a hard press, I think.
Yeah, but this
I'd say
and Hutch and
Ponch and John, Starsky and Hutch. Yeah,
Turner and Hooch. Oh, wrong era.
Wrong era.
We'll get there.
I think I looked at it. I'm looking at each era, and you go from this totally family based to this totally get your mind off of everything era from Vietnam to 70 to 79, where now we're like
Travolta.
We still have our family shows, but we're like the geeks are starting to rise.
Yeah.
Right. So you're getting more of your cop show. Now we've got Battlestar Galactica. The whole civil rights movement in the 60s brings forth Benson, brings forth Fat Albert and the Junkyard Gang. We get Sanford and Son. We get all of these shows, and then it starts throwing down. The Geek Gauntlet comes out, $6 Million Man.
Star Trek.
Star Trek really starts to take hold. Bionic Woman.
This is when Wonder Woman shows up.
Hulk,
Land of the Lost,
Spider-Man.
Land of the Lost, yes.
Planet of the Apes is in this era. Like we really start to get the
foundation for what we have now.
Of what we have now.
And in the terms of comedy shows, you had the Carol Burnett show, which was a rarity for a woman comedian to have her own variety show like she did. So I mean, that was plus it was just really freaking funny. I mean, but it was groundbreaking, but she was also really funny.
And women were really starting to, I feel like I'm not the one that should be saying this, but women are really starting to take a lot more of a prominent role during this.
Charlie's Angels.
And that's
Wonder
TV that
Woman.
did that. And yes, Charlie's Angels, they're still misogyny, but the women are still the main characters. And
Well, there was
of
there
course,
was a
we don't
show
judge.
called
You
Julia,
can't judge
which
by today's
had-
standards. But yeah,
Well, there was also a show called Julia, which I think is actually it was the tail end of the '60s, if I remember correctly. But it starred Diane Carroll, Diane Carroll, who was, I think, the first African American woman to headline a show. She played a nurse.
yeah.
And so, I mean, they were still relegated to the women's occupations, but it was her show. And I mean, she had the serious adventures every single week. And it was, I think you guys are right. In this tail end of the 60s into the 79, there was a lot of groundbreaking TV that happened.
Yeah.
Blended families. You had the Brady Bunch.
You had the first
rollout.
interracial kiss, which was on
Yep.
Star Trek.
Star Trek.
Yep. Just so many powerful things
Yeah.
that were going on in TV in general. I think that, this, if you look at the similarities between the eras and today's TV, I think the closest that we're going to get, really like in line is the 70s, 79 era. Cause it was like the initial started to try to figure it out. The second one became commercialized, and we started to try and fix the era that we were in by calming everybody down.
Yeah.
And now this era that we come into, 70 to 79, is like, okay, we got it figured out. Let's play. And I think it just works. I think it was beautiful. I know personally, when I moved to Anaheim with my mom after my parents got divorced, we weren't allowed to watch cartoons, period, at my grandparents' house. And that's where we lived. So
That's why you moved in with me.
Yeah. So I was raised on Sherwood Schwartz.
Yeah.
Like, that's all, because that's all that was there. Gilligan, Brady Bunch, Leave It to, all of those Sherwood Schwartz shows, but also the classics. And I think that's where it saved a lot of us younger generation, our generation, kind of giving us this look back and to say, you did it right, dude.
Awesome. Okay, we could go on like this for hours, but we're going to have to move on, and we're going to jump to our listener feedback real quick.
And now, let's see what all of our geek rock stars have to say.
Okay, so for today's listener feedback, we asked our listeners what their favorite TV show was from this era, and we had a lot. So, we all know I don't read this. Hey, guess who's back? Courtney gets to start reading again. Yay!
I do. Okay, so bear with me, guys. I have my notes and I got to look down. So if I'm not looking at the camera now, you know why. Some of you had great answers, but inside your answers, you had TV shows that don't quite fall into this range. So if I truncate your answer, that's why. So save those shows for the next time when it's in the 80s era.
Next month.
Okay, so first off, we have Nicole Smith. And she mentioned that her sister and she regularly watched things like Mork and Mindy, Three's Company, and Laverne and Shirley, which are all fabulous answers. Nicole, you're the one that needs to save your answer for the 80s. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Scott Lundgren said MASH. It was the first dramatic television show he ever watched. His dad was great at explaining the subtext to what was being said, especially about Klinger's character, he said in particular, and they bonded over that. And he said he gravitated to shows and plays that had those unsaid undertones and insider jargon ever since. Jill Cathcart said Gunsmoke, and I'm surprised none of us mentioned that one. It's a great series with good characters. Foster is her favorite. She was actually thinking this week that she needed to find what service had it to watch in streaming, so she'd watch it with her dad when she was younger. Jill, if you don't find it, I will find out where Gunsmoke is streaming for you, and I will let you know on the comments on our page. And then our favorite voiceover actress, Ms. Kari Schulten, said The Facts of Life. I'm going to give you a pass on this one, Kari, because it started in 79, so you get special treatment. She liked the simple laughs, good message, and an easy watch. It was still a comfort, and it's still a comfort show for her. I think it's probably a comfort show for a lot of us, to be honest.
You know, you take the good, you take the bad, you take it
them
all.
both, and there you have.
There you have the facts of life.
Nice.
Do-do-do.
And there we also have the listener feedback.
Awesome feedback, guys. Again, we so appreciate this stuff. It means the world to us. And now we're going to jump over to the main event.
Now it's time for the main event.
Okay, so for our main event, before I get into it, we have so many main events answers that we are going to give you guys another Patreon show like we did for soundtracks. A couple of us are going to stick around and we're going to talk about some of our favorite shows from 1979 and earlier. Didn't make our main list, but definitely need to be mentioned. So if you're a Patreon listener, it comes out tomorrow. Okay, so for our top 5, for our main event, we asked, what is your top 5 favorite TV shows from 1979 or earlier? And I go first, and my first one is going to be Happy Days. Anything before Ted McGinley, because he's cancer to every show he's been on.
Married with children.
I kid. Well, every show that he goes on gets canceled eventually. But yeah, I love Happy Days. That's one of those ones I connected to as a kid. I used to watch it every single day on channel 10, I think, and then channel 11. You'd have half an hour on one channel and half an hour on another, and that was like our 6 o'clock viewing. Fonzie, I didn't understand that he really wasn't as cool as he was portrayed. But I love the character. I never saw the issue with Potsy. I know everyone.
Yeah, Potsy didn't bug me either.
I don't know why people. I mean, he's like the Ewok of the sitcom universe. He's tragically unhip, but he just seems like a cool guy to hang out with. He's the guy that would definitely spot you some money if you needed to get into the movie.
Heck yeah.
If he had any.
Because he's playing saxophone in the band. They're all so freaking musical on that show too. Everybody can play like 5 instruments. That's some talent. Okay, Skeeter, what is your number 5, sir?
My number 5, I kind of switched up my list a little bit just because after talking, my heart kind of changed. But my number 5 is MASH. I talked about it at the beginning, just the connection with my dad being a corpsman in the Navy, being attached to a MUST unit, which is mobile unit self-contained transportable, which is the same thing as MASH. And he was connected to it through that, and at the end, when he cried, I didn't understand, but that that whole thing just set in my heart, and that's what I just really loved MASH, but it's definitely in my top 5.
It's truly one of the perfect TV shows, I think.
Yeah.
Mr. Blythe.
My number 5 is the Jetsons. One of those things that I think led me into the technological lover that I am today. We're not quite there yet. 2062. I fully plan to see Jetsons World, so we'll cross our fingers and hope that it's here by then.
Yeah, I think you're gonna have to put your mind into the consciousness before then. Yeah. So tell me.
Hey,
nope. Go ahead.
No, my number 5 is, we talked about it already, is Gilligan's Island. I have such a soft spot in my heart for it. I think part of it is my dad was a sailor when I was a kid. We used to go sailing. So there's something about the skipper and his first mate. I could just totally relate to it. And there was something else I was going to say about it, but now I've completely forgotten. So
well, let me throw in this, and maybe you can think of it while I say this. This was the first game that all boys played of our age, of the this or that, which was Ginger or Marianne.
Yes.
Very important question that you knew who your friends were at that point, if depending on how they answered.
Well, and as a girl, you kind of had
Professor
to decide
or
if you were
the
going
professor?
to be Ginger or Marianne.
No,
it was never about who you were with.
Which one would you have called yourself, Satomi?
I was sort of a Ginger Ann, and I still am.
Fair enough. I got to ask Courtney, which one would you be?
Probably Marianne. Yeah, I'd say probably Marianne or Mrs. Howell.
The millionaire and his wife.
'Cause I will never ever be Ginger.
I just have to ask, how many show of hands, like how many of us are literally singing the theme song to Gilligan's Island in our
Right
head
here.
right now?
Heck yeah.
When Suchomi said the thing about you said it was your dad being a sailor, I was like, how many 3-hour tours did you go on?
Actually, quite a few, and thankfully we did not get lost on any of them. But we did go to islands.
And the always very fun question: why is it that the ship's crew only had one change of clothes, and everybody else who was only there for 3 hours had like a full wardrobe?
Full wardrobe.
That is a
Well,
good
and I don't know if you guys have ever seen this movie called Back to the Beach. It's a Frankie and
Frankie and Annette,
Frankie-
yes.
Yeah, Frankie and Annette, and it's like several years later, so it's 80s, right? And the bartender at the bar that they go to is Gilligan. And he's literally handing drinks to Frankie Avalon and coconut shells, right? And he's like, I know a guy who could take 2 of these and 2 feet of palm and make a transistor radio, but he couldn't fix a 2-foot freaking hole in a boat. Do you want to hear more?
Nice.
And he's literally, he spends the entire movie, he's a big character, he spends the entire movie trying to get someone to listen to his Gilligan's Island stories throughout the whole film. And the best part is at the very end, I've got to spoil it, it's good. The best part at the very end, he's got some hot chick that he's going to hook up with. And in comes the skipper. And he goes, little buddy, I need you. We got to go. He goes, not now, because the girl's beautiful. And he goes, I'm sorry, buddy, it's only a 3-hour tour. He looks at him and goes, it's never a 3-hour tour.
Nice. Okay, Courtney, what is your number 5? Yes. Number 5.
Bewitched. We talked about it.
Great show.
Bewitched.
Okay. My next one, we already talked about it, but leave it to Beaver for all the reasons I mentioned before. What is your number 4, Skeeter?
Well, I kind of blew it with that one, but I'm right there with you. But I'm going to go ahead and pull Land of the Lost. That was always such a fun show to watch. Saturday mornings, if we weren't, later on watching Bugs Bunny and Tweety, we were watching Land of the Lost with the Slee Stacks, and
they were terrifying.
Just a great fun show.
I still remember that episode where like they come in and they find, I think it's themselves like halfway out of rocks.
Yeah.
Like frozen. Like there's so many just images that you remember from that show. Good call, Skeet.
Nice. Blythe?
My number 4 is Schoolhouse Rock. Because who doesn't want to learn?
What's your function?
There's like every 7 billion songs. They're all fantastic.
Exactly. They did exactly what they set out to do, and that is to teach you and make you remember through the power of song.
I think that was the most educational thing on TV next to Sesame Street ever.
I actually got to go to a jam session with Jack Sheldon.
That's amazing.
We're going to talk after this because I want to hear.
That's a whole show.
Story. Wow. So top that one on yourself, Suchomi.
Well, I remember. So my number 4 is Addams Family, and I think exactly. And I love all things Halloween, and I think that was the beginning of that particular obsession.
Nice, yes. Miss Geeky Page.
The Muppet Show.
Without the warnings. We all love it. We all know it.
It's Muppets in a vaudeville theater.
It's perfect.
How can you go wrong?
Nice.
How can you go wrong?
With live guests.
Yes.
And Waldorf and Statler, who are my 2 favorite characters ever. And we have to get off this.
They're hilarious.
Oh, we need to do a show on the Muppet Show.
We really do. My next one up is going to be the only cartoon I put on my list, which was a takeoff of The Honeymooners, The Flintstones. Still hilarious to this day. The first TV show ever on prime time. And before The Simpsons came along, they were the longest running sitcom TV show ever.
Cartoon.
Hey, Fred. Hey,
They-
Fred.
Also, like The Simpsons, was actually geared toward adults.
Yep.
Mhm.
Even though I watched it as a kid.
Of course we did.
Yeah.
We all did.
Skeeter.
My number, we're at 3, right?
3.
Wow. Chips.
Is that Doritos or is that sour cream and onion?
No, that is the CHP parody that Ponch and John,
Watching John.
every single thing that rolled over blew up. It could be a 10-speed on the 101 would flip and explode.
Oh, it's true.
And recently I was watching it. I was binging and just watching like crazy. And I watched like a making
Mhm.
or no, I was watching a show, and you know how you kind of get more vigilant as you watch things, like noticing that cars and TV shows don't have rear view mirrors or headrests.
Yeah.
They were going by another car, and the camera shot was from the side, and in the reflection, you could see the bikes on a trailer,
Oh.
and it destroyed me. I was like,
Ah.
"What?" I'm all.
To be fair, it took you what, 20 years to figure it out?
30 years. Like I was
So you
like,
can't complain too much about that then.
okay, it's not too bad. Like any show where the cars just blow up on impact, like it is what
Because they
it
were all
is.
Pintos. That was the problem.
Right? Yeah.
Oh.
And it was literally not supposed to be a parody.
No,
It
But it
was
is.
supposed to be serious.
Yeah, it was. It was supposed to be
But
serious.
that's what
it
happens
was
when you cast Eric Estrada.
Eric. Oh, great. Dude.
Who this is like in no way cooler than Satomi's story, but I actually met him.
Ooh,
Ooh.
that is cool.
That's
Francis,
When he was still a
Not
soap star?
Francis
no,
Allowellen
this was-
Poncherello.
Ugh.
When my brother opened Police Chase, he was out there at Police Chase.
And he was a Mexican guy playing an Italian. Is that how that worked?
I don't
No,
remember.
he was-
Poncherello?
he was a
Ponch.
Hispanic guy playing a Hispanic guy.
Well, I thought, yeah. Anyway, Blythe.
My number 3 is the Super Friends.
Yes.
Some of the
That's
best.
the theme song I hear in my head.
Yes.
Some of the best like cheeseball superhero stuff that you'll ever see, and
the
gave
end
us
of that era for sure.
gave us the I believe it gave us the introduction to the Wonder Twins on
It
TV.
did. And
Hey.
Cyborg.
And Gleek.
Yeah.
Oh, Gleek.
Which
So, Aquaman making a peanut butter and jelly
I love.
sandwich.
That was one of the things when we were watching the Arrowverse and the Flash shows and stuff. The little bits that they would take from that show. I think
Yeah.
in one of the episodes you see like a cage, right?
Yes. And then we heard the super. I was at your house. We were watching it together.
yes. That was just so great when they do those kind of Easter eggs things in it.
He and I looked at
And
each
from
other
that-
and we're like, yes.
Well, that defined superheroes for our entire generation.
Yep.
If it wasn't for that, it's a good possibility we wouldn't be having this show because Geek would not have taken off. That's how important that show was. And I'm not understating it. I think it's an underrated show for how important it was. And I think that, it needs our respect. So, Tomi, what is your number 3?
Welcome to Fantasy Island.
The plane.
Tattoo, my favorite character. Period.
So great. I mean, essentially, it was Twilight Zone in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
And, there's nothing wrong with that at all.
No,
I even liked the reboot that they did.
I didn't watch it.
I actually
With
haven't seen
Malcolm
the reboot.
McDowell as Mr. Rourke.
I love Malcolm McDowell.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you knew who played what's his name?
Tattoo?
No, not Tattoo.
Mr. Rourke.
Yeah, who played Mr. Rourke? Who played
Ricardo
him?
Montalban.
Ricardo Montalban.
I can say
Montalban.
Ricardo Montalban, but I can't say Malcolm McDowell.
He was so committed to that role. He thought that this character should never have a wrinkle in his suit. So the entire time he filmed, he stood. He refused to sit down
I believe it.
till the end because he was that committed. Because he's like, no, he can't have any wrinkles. This guy is he's what do you say? I don't want to say he's a god, but, and that's how I left the sentence. I'm like, that's really interesting.
Well, Ricardo Montalban kind of was.
He was.
It kind of was.
He got through
Yeah.
3 filmings and he's like, I shouldn't have set this standard for myself.
Yeah, I should have been wearing a Hawaiian shirt and
Wait.
cutoffs. I'm just saying. Miss Geeky Page.
Let me just ask you one more thing here. One more thing, if I can.
Fire
Columbo.
away.
I love Columbo.
I love that. That was like his little catchphrase. And
Yeah,
his-
he would go, or it's what my beautiful wife tells me, and you never see the beautiful wife until like the very end, and it's Kate Mulgrew.
Is it really
there's your
Kate
gate-
Mulgrew?
I didn't know that actually.
Yeah, she's Mrs. Columbo.
Captain Janeway is Mrs. Columbo. Let's
She
put
could
them
do
in the
so much
same-
better.
It's a
She
shared
really
universe.
could.
Columbo exists within the Star Trek universe.
Which
Yeah,
also
he does.
exists within the Orange is the New Black universe.
Yeah, it's all the same. When Janeway goes to prison.
Oh. Prime directives. You don't mess around with it.
Psych.
My number 2 is Three's Company and Three's a Crowd and the Ropers. Everything that came with that.
Come and knock on our door.
Come and knock on our door.
Take
That-
us out that is new.
That was the first time that I understood the whole. Actually, I'm not going to go into that. Never mind. I'm going to edit that out. Okay. Yeah. No. That. Yeah. I never quite understood how. Well, because I was still pretty young at the time. Well, which one's his girlfriend? I'm really confused by this, and I didn't understand why Don Knotts had that thing, whatever it was, when he was trying to catch on him. Because I was really young when I started watching it. So. Yeah.
Wait. What?
John
Yeah.
Ritter, comedic genius.
Yes, Don Knotts.
Comedic genius.
Oh yes, both of everybody in that show was fantastic.
Yeah.
Just fantastic. Skeeter, you're number 2.
My number 2 is Buck Rogers and the 25th Century.
Or Duck
It
Rogers.
started in 79, but it only lasted for 2 years.
So we allowed it.
Super fan, just crazy. Buck Rogers, Dr. Theopolis, Twiggy, Aaron Gray as the beautiful Wilma Deering. Like, dude,
Yeah.
seriously, nothing better. I loved it. Still love it. Have it on DVD. If I can find it streaming, I'll watch it.
If you can
It's
send
on
me those next
Amazon.
time when you come to Vegas, bring those because I want to burn them. Not that I would do that, of course. Blythe.
My number 2 is the new Scooby-Doo movies. So this was a spin-off of the original Scooby-Doo where they brought in special guests.
Don Knotts.
Yep.
He was on one of them.
For their
I'm
mysteries.
sure he was.
And actually, going through the list, a lot of the things that we've brought up during this era, they were brought on as guests. The Addams Family,
The Brady Bunch
Batman
was, I
and
think.
Robin, the Three Stooges. Yeah, I believe the Brady Bunch. Just a lot of the things that were precursors to this era of television was brought onto the show.
Yep. Satomi.
Massive fan of Battlestar Galactica.
Cylons.
Oh my!
The
and-
original, not the remake.
Beep, 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 beep. I love both of them, actually. I happen to be a big fan of the reboot as well. And what's weird is that I have a memory of Battlestar Galactica going on for years, but it only aired for 1 season.
Right.
So
It's like
that-
it was on way longer than that.
Right? So it kind of speaks to the imaginations that were set on fire
Yeah.
by that show.
Very good. Courtney.
The Munsters.
Yep. Which
I
was
love
mentioned earlier.
Munsters. Probably one of the most perfect TV shows ever. And
I preferred it to the Addams Family. I really did.
I howled like a hyena with laughter when they made Agatha's theme in WandaVision.
The Munsters.
Exactly, an homage to the Munsters. I was like, that's perfect.
And that was so 70s rock and roll too, at that
Oh, yeah.
psychedelic rock. It was so fantastic. Okay, my number 1, which we don't really need to discuss since we talked about it literally the entire episode, Brady Bunch. Just perfection. I still love it to this day. I can still sit down and watch the episodes without a hint of irony.
Marsha.
I'll never be a teen model.
But it turned out better than it started. I'm beautiful. Why are you ugly, Jan? Skeeter, go ahead.
Number 1, because he's one of my heroes, Mork and Mindy.
Nanu.
So
Going back to our first comment from the show starting.
Yes. I couldn't get enough of it. The old, Mork and Mindy, Shall's Bot, the
Mork from Ork.
What was Mork's hand thing?
Nanu.
It was like,
Or was it?
Was it a Vulcan thing or
Was it?
I
thought it was bent or something, and he shook hands like this.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't
that's
remember.
what it
Anyway.
I just remember his spaceship was an egg.
Yeah.
Yes,
and it was
yes.
an
Fantastic.
egg.
And
And
Jonathan Winters.
He talked to the
was
home planet, and
And
the
Jonathan Winters was the baby.
worst ending in history
Worse.
in all of TV. That still to this day upsets me. And
I
is
don't
no
remember
excuse.
it, so don't remind me.
It's bad.
Yeah, I think that had a lot to do with what was going on in Robin's personal life, and we'll just leave
The
it right
cocaine, yes, okay. Blythe.
My number one is Speed Racer.
Go
I
Speed
believe
Racer,
this was
go
my
Speed
earliest
Racer.
my earliest viewing of anime, which branched me into the media that I love most today.
Outstanding. Satomi?
The grandmother of all sci-fi, Twilight Zone. I can still watch it today. The stories are great. I've read the stories. The scripts read beautifully. And if there is a Twilight Zone marathon, I have no problem just leaving the channel right there. And the start of so many careers too.
It's on Peacock for free if you want to watch the whole series.
Yeah, that might be
FYI.
happening. Yeah. And my favorite one is the dollhouse.
Oh,
First colorized one.
I like the one with
dummy
Agnes Moorehead where she's in the farmhouse.
We're going to have to update our episode on this.
With the dummy, not the dummy, what do they call the
The
ventriloquist
ventriloquist
dummy?
dummy? Oh, that was creepy.
Yeah.
I like the one with Agnes Moorehead where she's the farm woman and then the little space alien
Oh, yes.
shows up and then you pull back and it's us. And I'm like, oh,
Dun, 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 dun. Yeah. Courtney, go ahead. What's your number one?
Wonder Woman.
Big surprise to everyone.
Right, I know. Everybody's so surprised.
Yes, we already did.
Shocked.
We did discuss that a lot, but Linda Carter is the best Wonder Woman.
But then I'm like, none of you would buy it anyways. So.
No. She was the perfect Wonder Woman and still is to this day.
I'm glad she was in Wonder Woman 84.
She redeemed the movie to me with her little.
Yeah,
short
we've talked
cameo.
about that. And we're done with that now.
Yes, she didn't want to discuss it again. It's like me discussing Green Lantern. Okay, so I know you guys are yelling at your computer screen or your phone or whatever. You missed this. Sign up for our Patreon. Go listen to our honorable mentions, and we'll hopefully catch a lot that we missed. Check out our Patreon in general. You'll get a lot of extra shows. We have a lot of content. And we work really hard on them, and we really do try to give you a little something extra for supporting us a little bit. Go to the website, www.iheartgeekshow.com. Use the com.
We
paid extra for it.
Didn't want to say it. Go to our Facebook, like, subscribe, tell your friends about us because that means the world to us. So until next time, I'm Dub. I'm here with Courtney and Skeeter and Satomi and Blythe. Keep on geeking on, kids.
You have been listening to the latest episode of the iHeart Geek Show. Make sure you visit our website at www.iheartgeekshow.com. Make sure to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And if you check us out on YouTube, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And keep on geeking on to all of you geek rock stars.